Hey, welcome to practice test 10. We're starting off with the first module. Let's go. For a particular machine that produces beads, 29 out of every 100 beads it produces has a defect. A bead produced by the machine will be selected at random, blah, blah, blah. What is the probability of selecting a bead that has a defect? When somebody asks you for a probability, they're actually just asking you for a fraction. And in this case, in order to have a defect, well, they said you have a defect in 29 out of every 100. And when you see that word out of, that's your key that that's the fraction bar. And then when you see the 29 and out of every 100, that means you just put 29 over 100, and that's it. Super easy problem. We got number 2 over here. It says the equation gives the speed in miles per hour, blah, 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 blah. When I get a lot of words, I like to just jump straight to the question. It says, what is the speed in miles per hour of the car 5 seconds after it began to accelerate? Well, 5 seconds, that seems like the only number that they're giving me. But over here it says t is the number of seconds. This is super common. So all that means is you're just going to replace this with a 5. So all you got is 40 plus 3 times 5 equals s. And okay, that's just 40 plus 15. And sounds like that is what they were looking for because they asked for the speed. So speed does equal 55. If you like these videos, don't forget that you can get my help directly at boringmathtutor.com. If 4x equals 3, what is the value of 24x? You know what you could do? You could divide by 4. And then you can take the fact that x is 3/4 and plug that in over here. Now, some of my other students will probably be like, well, okay, whatever, that's easy enough. I now know how to type that in DESMOS. That's pretty easy. It's just 6 times 3, so that comes out to 18. But what if I wanted a shortcut? Well, it turns out if 4x is equal to 3 and you're trying to jump to 24x, all you got to do is multiply by 6, because 6 times 4x does get you 24x. So that would have been a nice shortcut that also would have gotten you to that 18 nice and fast. What website are you supposed to go to? boringmathtutor.com. Which video are you supposed to like and subscribe to? This one. Let's keep going. Look at this. They are giving us a scatter plot, and they want to know which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit. Well, here's the line of best fit. And to me, that looks like it's got a positive y-intercept. These are my only options, so it's pretty clear it's the positive one. So it's got to be one of these. And then what about the slope over here? Well, it's heading up. That means it's a positive slope. When you're seeing things are on the up and up, you're very positive. When things are going down, you're very negative. But we're not negative here, so that means we cancel out this one that has a negative slope, and we have to go with choice A. Let's go to number 5. Of 300,000 paper clips, 234,000 are size large. What percentage of paper clips are size large? This is a pretty easy problem. All you need to do is set up a fraction, and in this case I know that they both end in 1,000, so I'm actually just going to set up 234 divided by 300, and that's it. Now that's 0.78, which is the same thing as 78%. That problem was stupid easy. Here they want to know which of the following equations represents what you got in the table. And the very first thing that's popping out at me is that they gave me a point where x is equal to 0. So automatically I know what the y-intercept is. The y-intercept is 18. So it can't be A, could be B, can't be C, it could be D. But then I can try to figure out what the slope is, because when the run is +1, the rise is -5. So rise over run tells me it's got to be -5 over 1, and that means that we are DONE. We are done. This one's given us a function, and then they want to know what we're going to get when we do f of 2. So what that means is you just want to replace all of these x's with 2. And that's all you gotta do. So it's 2 squared, which is 4, plus 2, which is 6, plus 71. 6 plus 71 is 77. And now we are done. Also, if you're liking the video, don't forget what website you're supposed to go to. That's right, boringmathtutor.com. Let's get this problem done. M to the 4 times m to the 1. M to the 4 times m to the 1 is m to the 5. Those are the only m's in the problem, and we're done. We don't even have to look at the rest of it because there's no way that any of that other stuff is going to affect the fact that it's got to have m to the 5. Don't forget what website to go to. First thing you got to do when they're telling you that one triangle is similar to another triangle, you need to set up 2 triangles that look like they have the same shape but not the same size. Now you also got to figure out which one is the bigger one. Well, let's say I just decide to call this one ABC, and I say that AB is 170 and BC is 850. Please do not laugh at my scale. It does not make any sense, but that's okay. We just need to set things up, and then we'll go with the flow. And then it says that YZ is 60. Okay, well, I did ABC like this, so I have to do X, Y, Z like that. Now, YZ is only 60, but that clearly corresponds to BC. And what are they asking me for? They're asking me for the length of XY. So, okay, that's the one over here. It's actually across from angle Z, so a good thing to do would be to call it side Z. But here, all I need to do when I have similar triangles is to set up a proportion. So I can just say 170 over 850 is going to equal Z over 60. So now to solve that, I just need to get rid of the divide by 60. And I do that by introducing a times 60 on the other side. And at that point, I can just go to DESMOS and do 60 times 170 over 850. And it turns out that comes out to 12. Now we are done, but you're not done until you go to your favorite website. Finally, they gave us a problem that is poppin'. We have x over y over here, but we also see x over y right there. And they told me that x over y is 4, so that means I can just make a cool substitution where I say it's going to be 24 over n times 4 equals, well, turns out 4. But now they're asking me what's the value of n. So all I have to do is solve this. If you want a cool way of solving this, you could divide both sides by 4. That'll cancel out that 4. And on the right side, you'll just get 1. And now you have 24 over n equals 1. Well, what do you think n's got to be over here? You could cross multiply if you want, but it's pretty clear that it's got to be 24. So that way 24 over 24 does come out to 1. So the answer is 24. If you go to boringmathtutor.com, you could get my number and get contacted and schedule a session within only 24 seconds. When I have a lot of words in my problem, I like to read the actual question before I read anything else. What is the predicted volume in milliliters draining from the container each second? Well, now let me take a look at my equation. And T usually stands for time. And yeah, okay, over here they confirm that. But then what does the W stand for? The W is the volume of liquid in milliliters. And what were they looking for? The amount of volume in milliliters that drains from the container each second. Now, each second could be translated as the change in T is 1. And when they say, what is the predicted volume that's draining? You could say, well, the change in V has to be some sort of negative amount. We got to figure out what that amount is, and you might have been able to guess it by now, but there's a couple of different ways to do this problem. One way is to use the fact that we know what the slope is. We know the slope is -4. Now, -4 could also be written as -4/1. But slope is always change in y over change in x. In this case, we don't have y and x. We have w. I don't know why they're using w for volume, but that's what they're doing. Over t instead of x. So that means we got -4/1 equals change in w over change in t. They want the change in t to just be 1. So that means that the change in w, which is the letter I should have been using over here because it's not v, it's w for some reason, is -4. So therefore, how much are you losing each second? Well, you're losing 4. So that's one way to get the problem done. Another way to get the problem done would be by thinking about, well, what happens when the change in t is 1? Maybe when t goes from 0 to t equals 1. And if t was equal to 0, then you'd have 300 minus 0, which is just 300. If t is equal to 1, then you'd have 300 minus 4. And just from that, you can kind of tell, oh, wait, it's going down by 4. So either way you do it, you get the answer of 4. This is a really cool website. Go check it out. All right, let's go straight to the question. For how many values of x does f of x equal 0? Now, f of x is the same thing as just saying y. So they want to know when the y equals 0. Well, that always happens whenever you're on the x-axis. And how many times does that happen? It happens 3 times. This problem is done. It's too easy. Let's move on. They're asking us which of the following is the best interpretation of 3000 in this context. Now we got to actually look at the equation and read the problem. A conservation scientist implemented a program to reduce the population of a certain species in an area. The given function estimates the species population x years after 2008, where x is less than or equal to 8. Okay. Well, this is a problem where you want to use the power of 0. You want to replace this x with 0. Why would you do that? Because if you did, then you'd have 3000 times 0.75 to the 0. Anything to the 0 is 1, which means you can just cross it out, which means that when x is 0, your f of x ends up being 3000. Now, what that means is that you have waited 0 years after 2008. Well, if you waited 0 years after 2008, what year is it? It's still 2008, right? So let's go take a look to see which one of those could possibly make sense. Now, I'm skipping over these things that say that the 3000 is the percent decrease. That doesn't really seem to make sense here. Let's keep reading though. It's the estimated population for the species and area 8 years after 2008, or it's the estimated initial population in 2000. Ooh, what year did we say it was? We said it was 2008. In 2008. Initial seems to make sense because initial is what happens when you didn't wait. Very impatient. You only waited 0 years? That's not a lot of years to be waiting. That's the initial population. Answer is definitely D. If you like that problem and you want more easy SAT explanations, this would be the best website to go to. It's a joke that I even need to include this problem over here, because all you gotta do is go to DESMOS, click at the bottom, and say the value of x where that happens is 7. That's when y reaches its minimum. So y is at the smallest when x is 7. They told us that square A has to have side lengths that are 166 times the side lengths of square B. So I already drew 2 squares. I let the side length for B be x, and I did my best to draw a side that looks like it's 166 times as big, and that would mean that that one would be 166x. But now we have to translate what they're saying over here. They're saying that the area of square A is your hint for an equal sign. The area of square A, well, I can actually tell you what that is right now. It's just going to be 166x squared, because you'd have to multiply it by itself. And then it's saying is k times the area of square B. Well, what would the area of square be? Well, that would just be x squared. And now they want to know the value of k. So all I have to do is divide both sides here by x squared. But I can already tell you that the top is just going to be 166 squared x squared. And then you're dividing that by x squared. So the x squareds are going to cancel. And the only thing that you're going to need to type in is 27556. That is the answer to the problem, 27556. They want to know the value of B here. You could just enter both of these into DESMOS and then figure out what the y value is. The way you'd have to do that in DESMOS, by the way, is you'd have to put an x wherever you see the a's and a y wherever you see the b's. Otherwise, it's not going to figure it out. The other thing you could do is you could subtract the 2 equations the way that they are right now, because these will cancel, and you'll just get 4b equals 100, and then you divide by 4, and then that just tells you that b is 25. Here they are asking for a y-intercept. The key for y-intercept problems is just to replace x with 0. Now, if I put a 0 right there, then 2 to the 0 is just 1, so that just goes away. And now all I have to do is -8 plus 22, which is 14. And we're out of here. All right, so my habit is always to read the actual question first, which equation represents this relationship, but that's obviously not getting me anywhere. I have to read this. 2 variables, x and y, are related such that for each increase of 1 in the value of x, the value of y increases by a factor of 4, and also when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 200. Well, it turns out that we actually only need to focus on this part over here where it says the value of y increases by a factor of 4 for every increase in 1 in the value of x. Okay, so the only way that that can happen is if you put a 4 underneath your exponent of x, because what's going to happen with that is it would be like 200 times 4 to the 1, and then 200 times 4 to the 2, and what's happening there? It is actually increasing by a factor of 4, which just means that you're multiplying by another 4. So each time you would be multiplying by 4. So the answer has to be D. It's the only one that has a 4 underneath the x. That's the only way that that's going to happen. You could go check the other ones and see that it's not going to give you that same kind of pattern. And yeah, will y equal 200 when x is equal to 0? It will. That's true. 200 times 4 to the 0 means 200 times 1. So yep, that's 200. That's our answer right there, D. Okay, so this one is ridiculously easy, whatever way you choose to do it. One way to do it is by knowing that you can always subtract 2 pi from this, but you can also subtract it as many times as you want. So if I subtract 2 pi 21 times, then what's that going to get me? It's going to get me sine of 0. But what is sine of 0? Well, it turns out that's 0. You would also get the answer if you just went to DESMOS and typed in sine of 42 pi. Boom. So quick, so easy. What the hell is going on? Why are they lowering the standards in this country? This one here is a real banger. They are saying that it has no solution. The first thing that I'm going to do, though, is add 9y to both sides. That's going to clean up that top equation. That top equation is now just going to be 4x equals 18y plus 5. And then I am going to subtract 5 from both sides. I'm going to do that so that way it now looks more like that other equation, the one with the h in it. That equation, I'm going to write the hy on the right side, just so that way I am now lining up all of my variables. So I got a y column over here, and I kind of have an x column right there. I guess I could move that around a little bit and make that 4x plus 2 instead, just so that way it's perfectly lined up. And then I also have a constant column. Now the key about no solution problems is that you want all of your variable columns to be the same. That has to happen. And then your non-variables will not be equal. Well, these are clearly not equal. But what did I say first? I said that the variable columns must be the same. In other words, we're going to require that 18 equals h. What are they asking for? They're asking for h. So that means the answer is 18. Duh. If you think that these videos are amazing, forget about liking and subscribing. Don't worry about that. Just go to boringmathtutor.com, sign up for some SAT tutoring. One solution to the given equation can be written as 1 plus root k. What is the value of k? Well, the first thing you might want to do is recognize that this looks a lot like the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's do the quadratic formula. Let's go. This is your b value right there. So negative of b would be a positive 2. Then it's going to be plus or minus. Well, it's negative 2 squared, which is the same thing as 2 squared, which is 4. Minus 4 times a is just 1, so you just have to multiply by c, which is negative 9. And you have to put that all over 2 times 1, so that's just 2. And then underneath that square root, that is going to be a minus times a minus, which is a plus. And 4 times 9 is 36. 4 plus 36 is 40. So now we have root 40. We got 2 plus or minus root 40 all over 2. Here's the thing about root 40 though. It can be broken up into root 4 times root 10. Why would you want to do that? Because root 4 is just a 2. So now you have 2 root 10, which means we now are blessed with having 2's everywhere, which means we can divide each of these things by 2, giving us a 1, 1, and you guessed it, a 1. So now we have 1 plus or minus root 10 over 1. But here's the thing. We don't need to put over 1. And now we're matching this up with 1 plus root k. Well, clearly, one of the possible solutions there is 1 plus root 10. And if we're matching up 1 plus root 10 with 1 plus root k, what do you think k's got to be? I'll let you think about it. Last one in the first section, let's get her done. They are asking us which of the following is one of the solutions to the given equation. It's like the first time I needed to think in this section. When they ask for a solution, then they mean that you're going to solve for x. Here's the thing though, x is showing up in so many different places, so trying to get x on its own gonna be a little tricky in this problem. But here's a trick. I see x squared minus c squared right here. And if I were to subtract this entire guy to the left side, I'm going to keep this other guy on the left side, but if I subtract that guy to the left side, it's now minus. He'll go away on that side, and then I'll still have the 39. But they have a common denominator. Therefore, I just have to write that denominator one time, but what do I put up top? Well, that would be x squared minus c squared. And that's the key to the problem. Because when you have x squared minus c squared to the 1 over x squared minus c squared to the 1/2, then you can subtract those exponents and say you have x squared minus c squared to the, well, 1/2, which is the same thing as saying a square root. So now you have this. But remember, we're trying to find what x is. We're trying to solve for x. So x is showing up right here. So I still have to square both sides to cancel out the square root. And then what? I need to add the c squared. So then I'll get 39 squared plus c squared. Last step remaining is to do a square root. Whenever you do a square root, you always also need to put a plus or minus. So now we are up to plus or minus the square root of 39 squared plus c squared. So all of that equals x. So which one of these is one of the solutions? Well, let's see. Square root of 39 squared plus c squared looks like that one. It's got the minus in front of it, which is okay because it's one of the solutions. Remember, it's plus or minus. Don't forget, if you want to boost your SAT score, there's only one way to do that. BoringMathTutor.com. I'll see you in the next section. An airplane descends from an altitude of 9,500 to 5,000 at a constant rate of 400 feet per minute. What type of function best models the relationship between the descending airplane's altitude and time? Is it decreasing exponential? Is it decreasing linear? Well, it's definitely decreasing because it's a descending airplane and its altitude is going down. So we know it's either A or B, but it is going down at a constant rate of 400 feet per minute. So what that means is that you would do minus 400 and then minus 400, then minus 400, and so on and so on. So it's a linear one. Exponential is in case it was constantly being divided by something, or multiplied in case it was an increasing exponential. But our answer is definitely B. They want to know the slope of line J. Well, they said that line J is parallel to line K. Here's line K. Parallel lines have equal slope. So whatever the slope of this one is the slope of the other one. Stupid easy. All right, so here they are asking us what's the best interpretation of the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept in this case is 30, but what does that represent? Well, it's telling me that x is the number of popsicles, and a y-intercept is always when x is equal to 0. So if x was equal to 0, then you would have 30. But 30 what? Well, it tells you that the function approximates the volume of juice that Caleb had remaining after making x popsicles. So if x was 0, that would mean that he didn't make any popsicles at all. In fact, we could say that that's when he began. And I'm seeing the words when he began here. And it looks like our answer C. Caleb had approximately 30 when he began. Looking good. Here they want the best interpretation of the vertex. Well, the first thing we need to do is take that equation and identify the vertex. Now, it's in the form of a times x minus h squared plus k. And the vertex is always going to be h comma k. So what is our h in this case? It is 5.6. And then our k is 502. So that means I know that my vertex is 5.6 comma 502. So 5.6 being the x and 502 being the y. Now that we know that, we need to see which one of these is describing that in the right way. Well, 5.6, that is a x coordinate, and x is the number of seconds after it was launched in the air. And 502, that's a y coordinate, and y is the height of the rocket. Okay, so let's see. This toy rocket reaches an estimated maximum height of 502 feet, 16 seconds? No, that's not true. It's got to have the 5.6 in it. It reaches a maximum height of 502, 5.6 seconds after it's launched in the air. Yeah, that looks excellent. Now, if I take a look at any of these other answer choices that actually have those same numbers in it, this one says it reaches a maximum height of 5.6. No, that's the y. And then they mixed up the x and the y. So no, the answer is definitely B, that it reaches a maximum height of 502 feet, that being your y. This problem is what I like to refer to as super cool. They're asking for the value of f of 10. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to replace my x's with 10. Now 10 minus 1 is just 9, so I'm just going to put times 9 right there. So we got k times 9. But then they told us that f of 5 is 32. Now what that's going to do for you is it's going to help you figure out your k value. So what you do is you start with f of 5, and you just plug in the 5 wherever you see the x. So in this case, that just turns into 4, right? But we know that f of 5 is supposed to equal 32. So that means this whole thing equals 32. Now 4 times 5 is 20. So I have 20 plus 4k equals 32, which means that 4k must equal 12. And then that means that k is equal to 3, which is great because that was the missing piece to figuring out the value of f of 10. So now that I know k is 3, I just do 3 times 9, which is 27, plus 4 times 10, which is 40, and that is 67. Don't forget, if you want to boost your SAT score, there's only one way to do it. Here they're saying triangle ABC and DEF are congruent, A corresponds to B, blah, blah, blah. B and E are right angles. That means I'm going to need to drop a right triangle down into the mix. And let's just declare that this one is angle B. And also, I'm going to copy this because they said that for the other one, E is the right angle. And they're saying that angle A is 18 degrees. So let me just say that this is 18 degrees. So that would go ABC. And the other one is DEF, so that means D goes here, F goes there. And now they're asking me for the measure of angle F. Well, angle F is right here. It's going to be the same thing as the measure of angle C. And I can actually easily tell you that the measure of angle C is just going to be 90 minus the 18. And that's going to be 72, and we're done. I would say the easiest way to get this one done is to just fire up DESMOS. And to know how to type it in, what you do is you put greater than, and then you put an equal sign right after. It's the quickest way to get this typed in. And now we're looking for one of those points that is a solution to this. Now, just by using my visualization here, I can see that around this region would contain 14,0, just so that way you guys can see that. Boom, look at that. That is in the overlap between the two shaded regions, so we are done. That is definitely the fastest way to get this problem done. You definitely want to use DESMOS for this. They're asking us whether the median of dataset A is equal to the median of dataset B, and also are the standard deviations equal. Well, the median is the easier thing to figure out. The median is just the one that's in the middle. And it looks like for both of those, the median is going to be 13 because it's whatever's in the middle. But when it comes to the standard deviation, what you're looking at is how far things are spread out about the mean. And the mean, because both of these are symmetric, are actually going to be the same thing as the median. So now we just want to ask ourselves, which one is more spread out about 13? And you can actually kind of visually see this. You can see that over here, things are not as spread out away from the 13 as they are over here. Over here, it looks like you have more stuff that is spread out away from the 13. For 1, we have 3 data points here at 13. Here we only have 1. But then you can see that it's almost like it got squished a little bit and you kind of moved the data a little bit more that way. So there's definitely more spread in data set B, and more spread means that you have more standard deviation. So are the standard deviations equal? Nope, they're not. So therefore, 1 only. Here we got a scientist that initially measures 12,000 bacteria in a growth medium. 4 hours later, scientist measures 24,000. Assuming exponential growth, the formula P equals C times 2 to the RT gives the number of bacteria in the growth medium where R and C are constants and P is the number of bacteria T over the blah, blah. Where's the value of R? Okay, so we need to pay attention to the fact that they said initially it was 12,000. What that means is that when you've waited 0 whatever hours in this case, that you end up getting 12,000. So the notation for that is P of 0 equals 12,000. Then 4 hours later, we got 24,000. So what's the notation for that? The notation is P of 4 equals 24,000. And now, when P of 0 equals 12,000, well, that's actually going to get you this C right there. Because if I were to plug in the 0 here for the T, then you would find out that, yeah, it turns out you're just going to be able to use 12,000 right there. So that's a handy thing to memorize, that whenever anything is in that form of y equals a times b to the x, the a is always the y of 0 value. Anyway, now we have times 2 to the rt equals p, and this is the time where we want to plug in the 24,000 and the 4. So it's going to be equals 12,000 times 2 to the r times 4. And now we just want to divide here. And if we divide by 12,000, then we're going to end up getting 2 equals 2 to the 4r. And now I can rewrite 2 as 2 to the 1, which means that 1 must equal 4r, so r must be 1/4. It says a cube has a volume of that. Now what you should know is that a cube has a volume of whatever its side length is, cubed. That's actually why we call it cubed, by the way. And now we know that that is what the volume is, so that means that's equal to s cubed. Then it says, what is the surface area of the cube? Well, the formula for the surface area of a cube is going to be 6s squared. And that's because if you happen to have, let's say, a tissue box or something like that. It's got 6 faces to it. If it's a cube, all of them are the same. So then you just do 6 times s squared. So we can finish doing this problem on DESMOS here. The way we're going to do it is we're going to take the cube root of that 474,000 thing. So we go to functions and scroll all the way down, and we want the cube root of that number. But then what are we going to do with that? We're going to take that and we're going to square it and stick a 6 in front of it. And then there you go. That's it. That is the answer to the problem right there. If you want to boost your SAT score, don't forget there's only one way to get that done. I'll see you in the next one. Okay, this problem is asking you what's the value of 8x plus 7y. Well, the funny thing about that is that instead of calling it 8x and 7y, because it's 8x everywhere, let me just call that A, and then I'm going to call all of those 7y's, I'm going to call all of those B. So then if I do that change, I can now add up these two equations. Why? Because we're going to get a nice cancellation right there. So like 2a minus 2a would cancel. And then this would be 4b plus 4b, which would be 8b equals 24. And that means that b itself would just be 3. Now remember, I'm trying to do this as 2a plus 4b equals 12. And I'm telling you that now b is 3. So then 4 times 3 gets me 12. So 2a plus 12 equals 12. You might have already been able to tell that a is going to equal 0. So when they asked for 8x, remember, that is what I was doing as a, and 7y, that's what I was doing as b. So a plus b would be 0 plus 3, which is 3. We're done. All right, this one is telling us that we have an area in square miles, but then they want us to change that to square yards. But they're being kind of nice here where they're telling us that 1 mile is the same thing as 1760 yards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out that 1 mile for 1760 yards, but I still have the square right there. So that means that I need to square this whole thing. Now, of course, I would still have my 4.36 times all that. And really, at this point, I'm already going to be in terms of square yards. I now just have to figure out what 1760 squared is and multiply that by 4.36. So we just go to DESMOS, we type that in, 1760 squared times 4.36. And that comes out to this guy right here. All right, we're done with the problem. To start this problem off, I decided to graph these 3 points and make it a triangle. But then it's telling us that we have another 3 points where they're pretty similar, but instead you can see that they changed the 7 to a 7 plus k, and they changed the 6 to a 6 plus k, and then they're telling us that k is some sort of positive constant. And they're saying that the measure of angle Q is T, so let's get this labeled. This is P, and then Q is the 4,7, and then this one would be R. But then they're talking about L, M, and N, but I can't do a graph of that before I know what K is. Well, I could just let K be something as simple as 1. So if K was 1, then 7 plus 1 would push me up here. And then 6 plus 1 would push me out over here. And now I can label what this triangle is. So this one is L. And then M is the one up here. and then this would be n. And they're asking for the measure of angle n, but they're telling me that angle Q is t, so that means t goes right here. So it's t degrees, I'll just put a t. And that would mean that this one is also t up here. But that means that angle n, which is the one that they're asking about, would be 90 minus t. That's all you got to do. So it was a little bit difficult to keep track of this, but just with a simple sketch and by plugging in a number for k, we were able to get it done. All right, we got a small business owner. He's budgeting $2,200 to purchase candles. The owner must purchase a minimum of 200 candles to maintain the discounted pricing. If the owner pays $4.90 per candle, purchase small candles, $11.60 for the large ones. What's the maximum number of large that the owner can purchase, stay within the budget, and maintain the discounted pricing? Okay, so if he wants to stay within his budget, then that means he needs to be doing less than or equal to $2,200 total in purchases. If he wants to maintain the discounted pricing, well, what did they say about maintaining the discounted pricing? They said that he's got to do at least 200 candles. So that means we have to have something that's greater than 200. Well, what do we have? We have small candles and we got large candles. So if I call the small candles S and the large candles L, that means S plus L has to be greater than 200. Now, actually, there's a mistake here. Greater than or equal to 200, because it's a minimum of 200, so he could do 200, but he could also do more. And then as far as the $2,200, well, how is that going to go down? It's going to be that you have to do 490 times the number of small candles, so that's 4.9S, plus 11.6 L. And that has to be less than or equal to 2,200. Now, I would say that we want to just go to DESMOS here, and we want to use X instead of S, and then Y instead of L. But I'm going to type everything in. And then once I type everything in, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the maximum number of large candles. Okay, so let's zoom out here. And we're looking for where we have overlap between two things. Let me not make this black. That's a little silly. Okay, so now we're looking at where there's overlap in the two shadings, and we want the maximum number of L. Well, that would be the maximum number of Y. And, okay, this is getting a little weird because we're getting to 182 point something. Well, you can't actually purchase that many large candles, but you would be able to do 182. Now, if you just want to verify that you actually can do 182, then you can put Y equals 182 and make sure that there's a possibility for X being a whole number within that range. And yeah, it looks like X could be 18. So it's because we got to make sure that both of these are whole numbers, right? So turns out 18 actually is a possibility. So 182 would be the maximum that Y could be. And that's the answer to your problem. So yeah, it would turn out that you would want to use 18 small candles and then 182 large candles, and that adds up to 200. But yeah, as far as the answer goes, it's just 182. All right, the first thing I'm going to do here is sketch a square that's inscribed inside of a circle. But then they said that the radius of the circle is this. Now, by the way, 20 divided by 2 is just 10, so they could have just said it's 10 root 2. But then the smart way to draw this would be to draw it to one of the corners of the square. So you're going to say that this is 10 root 2. And they're asking you what is the side length of the square. So basically they want to know x up here. Well, one thing you could do is just start by figuring out what this is, and then we'll just double it. So I'm just going to call this x instead, and then we'll figure out what it is and then double it. Now if this is 10 root 2, then it's actually fairly easy to get this problem done if you're familiar with what they gave you on the formula sheet here. They're giving you that when you have a root 2 as your hypotenuse, if you happen to have a 45-degree angle here, which we do, and then this one should be 45 degrees as well, then that means you can just say that x would be 10. So it would be 10 here and then 10 there. And now remember we said we just got to double that. So 10 times 2, that gets you 20. For this one, I'd recommend just doing DESMOS. Now, does this one intersect the y-axis at exactly 1 point? No. So let's move on to the next one. All I got to do is change this to a 4. Does that one intersect the y-axis? No, it's intersecting the x-axis. So that one's not right either. Now let's move on to the next one by changing this one to a 4 and this one to a 9. Does that intersect the y-axis at exactly 1 point? It sure does. Could you have done this without DESMOS? Sure, but honestly, DESMOS would be faster here. If you like that explanation, make sure you go to boringmaththeory.com. Let's move on. We got one of the equations in a system of 2 linear equations is given. The system has no solution. And they want to know what could be the other one. Well, one way to know that your 2 lines have no solution is if they're parallel. Then they will never intersect. And if you want to get parallel lines, well, you need to have the same slope. So the slope of this one is 6. So we're looking for another one that would have a slope of 6. If I were to solve this for y, then this one would have a slope of 6. But the problem is that that would be the same slope, sure, but it would also have the same y-intercept. And that's a problem because they won't actually be parallel in that case. They'll be the exact same line. So no, that would actually be an infinite amount of solutions where they would be on top of one another. So that's not our answer, but we can clearly tell that this next one is going to have the right slope and a different y-intercept, so that's our guy right there. To get this problem started, I recommend that you try doing a GCF right here, and the GCF would be xy, and that would mean you'd have x minus 8, and that's actually kind of nice because the other one has a x minus 8 up top. So that now brings us down to y over xy. And now the y's actually cancel as well. Now I can't just leave nothing up top. I would have to put a 1. So that means I now have 1 over x plus all of this down here. And normally I want to get a common denominator. So that means I'm going to multiply the denominators by each other. And that means I'm going to multiply everything here by x and everything here by x minus 8. All right, so now x times x minus 8 is my common denominator. Up top, I'll have a xy plus 12x plus x minus 8. 12x plus x is 13x. Okay, so I'm in pretty decent shape here where I'm up to xy plus 13x minus 8 over x times x minus 8. The problem is none of my denominators are x times x minus 8. But what I could do is take a look at this one. This one looks kind of similar to what I have. In fact, if I were to distribute over here, I'd get x squared minus 8x. This one is just all of that multiplied by y. So let me just replace this with x squared minus 8x. But then in order to get it to look like that one, I would just multiply everything by y. Now that would make the bottoms the same. But in that case, would the top be the same? Well, let's take a look. xy times y, xy squared looks pretty good. Y times 13x, 13xy, okay. And y times minus 8, yes, that actually is our answer. Now, we kind of got a little lucky. It's kind of a difficult problem. There's more than one way to get this problem done. Another way to get this problem done would have been by looking at all of your bottoms first. And if you look at all of your bottoms, you might notice that only 2 of those are the same, and that would be these 2. So then you might want to try to figure out how that one came across. But that's honestly a monster denominator. I wouldn't want to deal with that. I'd want to try to go after the one that looks the easiest first anyway. And that is the one that we ended up getting. And here's the alternate way you could have approached it. You could have said, all right, I want to try to get to this smaller denominator with a smaller number of terms, and maybe I can multiply this thing by something to get it to turn into that. Well, what would that thing be? It would be xy. So you'd want to multiply this by xy. If you do so, that would get you xy squared plus 12xy. And for the other one, I can also distribute. That would get me xy minus 8y. And all of that is over my common denominator of this. And now I know that these 2 add up to get me 13xy. And that's honestly the fastest way to get this problem done. I got a little bit lucky though. But trying to get to some of these other bottoms, it's possible, but since we already found a way to do it, let's just move on. This one is definitely the funnest problem on the entire exam. The first thing that I would do is multiply the entire thing by 1 over 20. Because if you do that, all of these 20s are just going to turn into a bunch of 1s. And then you might be thinking, well then I'll just flip everything, and then P will equal Q minus R minus S, and then when I'm trying to solve for Q, I'll just do P plus R plus S equals Q, and you would be completely and utterly wrong. That is not true. You cannot do just flipping all of these things. That does not work. So let's talk about what actually does work. We need to start by leaving it as 1 over P equals 1 over Q minus 1 over R minus 1 over S. Now we're trying to solve for Q, so there's a couple of things I could do. One is I do 1 over P plus 1 over R plus 1 over S equals 1 over Q. And now I want to get a common denominator here, which would be PRS. And in order to get that accomplished, this one needs to get multiplied by RS. This one needs to get multiplied by P and S. And this one needs to get multiplied by Q and R. So then I am left with RS plus PS plus QR equals 1 over Q. Now, why am I getting a common denominator and making it into just a single fraction there? I'm doing that because now all I have to do is flip both sides. So if I flip the right side, it will just turn into Q over 1, which is what they're asking for. It's the same thing as Q. And now if I flip this side, then it's PRS on the top, and it is answer choice C. Turns out this is also the most fun problem on the exam. If you want excellent explanations for all these problems, this is your website. Let's keep it moving here. They want no real solution to this. Well, let's get started by distributing this, and that'll get me kx squared minus 56x. And then I actually want a 0 on the other side. So I'm going to do plus 16 equals 0. And I want that 0 on the other side because I've gotten x squared over here. Now, at this point, they said that it has no real solution. Well, that reminds me of the discriminant. The discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac. If you want it to have no solution, you want that b squared minus 4ac to be less than 0. So let's see, what's our b in this case? It's negative 56, so it should be negative 56 squared minus 4 times a is k, and c is 16. Now that'll simplify to minus 64k. This will just be the same thing as positive 56 squared. The negative doesn't matter when you're squaring. And that's got to be less than 0. Let me add the 64k to the other side. And now I find out that k has to be greater than whatever 56 squared divided by 64 is. Let's go find out what that is. So that's 49. So therefore, k has to be greater than 49. So is the answer 49? Well, no, because if I'm looking for the least possible value of k, and k has to be an integer, and it has to be greater than 49, then the answer is 50. It has to be greater than 49. Not greater than or equal to, but greater. So there you go. Your answer is 50. Let's keep it going. All right, you guys are going to love this one. It says, for each real number r, which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation? Well, this is one where you could actually divide everything here by 5. And if we divide everything by 5, what would that equation look like? 2x plus 3y equals 7. Oh my God. That is the same equation as the one above. Well, what does that mean? That means that if I go to, let's say, C or D, where they're just using r in place of x, then I can try replacing this x with an r. So that would mean I would then have 2r plus 3y equals 7. And now the y, I want to solve for y right here and see if it's one of these. So that would mean 3y equals 7 minus 2r. If I divide everything by 3, then I end up getting y equals 7 over 3 minus 2/3 r. Do I see that anywhere? 7 over 3 minus 2/3 r. I don't actually see that. And I don't see that in D either. So it looks like it's not C or D. But if I go to B, B is telling me that I can replace the y with r. Okay, so let's try that. Let's try instead replacing the y with r. And then we have 2x plus 3r equals 7. And now let's try solving for what the x would be and see if it matches up with this. So that would mean 2x equals 7 minus 3r, divide everything by 2. And do I get something that is the same right there, 7 over 2 and a minus 3r over 2? That's our guy right there. So if you replace your y with r, then your x can be that. So very tricky problem, a little bit weird. When they said lies on the graph of each equation, it's kind of weird because each of them are the same graph. But yeah, it turns out that's what you want to do. You want to take that approach where you try replacing your x with r and see if it could be those. And then the next time you try the next easiest one, which would be replacing your y with r. Thank God we didn't have to worry about a. We're up to the last one over here, and don't forget, if you need easy explanations for any problem on any of these practice tests, this is the website to go to. Book a session today. A window repair specialist charges $220 for the first 2 hours of repair, plus an hourly fee for each additional hour. The total cost for 5 hours is $400, which function f gives the total cost in dollars for X hours of repair, where X has to be at least 2. Now, if you look at the very beginning, they said that you're charging $220 for the first 2 hours. Remember, X is the number of hours of repair. So if it's for the first 2 hours, that means that X would be 2. And f of X, that is the total cost of the repair. So that means f of X would equal $220 when X is equal to 2. So let's go take a look and see which of those are vibing with, when I plug in 2, I'm going to get $220. So if I were to plug in 2 right here, would I get 220? That would be 120 plus 100. Yes, I would. Okay, if I plug in 2 here, would I get 220? Of course not, because I've already got 220 right there. So that's not going to work. If I plug in 2 right here, 2 times 80, that's 160. Not happening. If I plug in 2 right here, 2 times 180, that is 160 plus the 220. Of course, it's not that one. So it can only be this one. I didn't even need to use this one. This was a nice and easy exam. Don't forget to go to your favorite website in the world if you want to boost your score. Book a session today. I've got the Calendly link in the description, and you can reach out to me and we'll discuss whatever you need to get your score where you want it to be.